everybody. Welcome to the Image and Wire Show. My name is Jake Fishman. I have Steve Harrold from Arterys here on the show. He's the director of product there. He's also had really a deep history in informatics, and he's a super smart guy and a really nice guy. And he's got a lot to share with us. So welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks, Jake. It's an honor to be here. Big fan of the show and of the Imaging Wire. It's where I go for most of my information every morning.
I should have mentioned at the beginning that Steve has great taste in in video interview shows and newsletters also. So this man of taste also has a man of experience. You have about 20 or about 2 years in AI and about 20 years in informatics. And really, if you consider the life cycle of those two areas, those are both kind of lifetimes, right? So you've had a front row seat to some big changes. And I was wondering if we could start off by kind of talking about your own history and what you've witnessed in terms of the evolution in informatics and then into AI.
Yeah. I didn't have a planned career, but I've had a very fortunate career. When I started out in the late 90s, it was just as the health system was converting radiology from film to digital, and I started a company called Mitra. And back in the day, if you were a digital hospital, you had a MitraPACS broker. We basically were the first to translate HL7 to DICOM and provide modality work lists and all of that. At the same time, we built the PACS, and we were acquired by a company called AGFA, who was also transitioning from a film strategy to a digital strategy. And, since that time, I've had business school, and I've learned a lot more about finance and investments and everything else. And I look back at what was going on during that time with my more mature eyes, and what was happening was you're seeing a value transformation happening. Film was very, very expensive to produce, to buy, to manage, to store, to archive, all of that, and very inefficient. You had to have radiologists with the film and everything else, and acquisition could be harder too. All the chemicals involved, environmental damage, all of that. All of that went away when we went digital, and that was the first big transformation that I got to experience in radiology, and it was a significant. And I loved it at the time because I was, I was an IT nerd. I liked big computers, and I spent the rest of my career working with teams building out these big, massive radiology IT solutions. At one point in my career, we were able to work on the largest IT project the world had ever undertaken, or at least that's what the marketing people claimed, and that was the first NHS kind of regional DICOM archive that supported a broad region for the population. And I remember working on that with that marketing message in my head as a kid. I'm like, this is amazing, working on one of the biggest computers in the world. And now, you saw these systems also build up in the US as IDNs consolidated into bigger IDNs and super IDNs, and radiology operations are massive. Again, they are, radiology is big data. You need big systems to push this data and process this data. And, the IDNs just, again, made that scale that much bigger. And you fast forward to now, and I think we're seeing almost the same kind of transformation that I felt at the beginning of my career. It feels like another fundamental value shift, in that the move to cloud is going to unlock a lot of capital that's essentially being wasted today, and at the same time be able to provide a better experience and also move the practice forward. So, yeah.
Right. That's interesting. So full circle, we spent all this time building the biggest in the world and all these complex systems, and then now you're or recently been part of kind of simplifying that structure. And it seems like that there's this, and you and I have talked before, and you've mentioned this big transformation taking place in radiology delivery. And I'm curious if you could kind of give us some background about what are the factors driving that transformation.
Yeah, I'm also a geek about market data. And, I do a few things. I talk to a lot of physicians and a lot of leadership in health systems and reading groups, and get their for sure firsthand perspectives. And I try to back it all up with as much statistically valid data. And we tend to produce our own data on these things. So we can see quite clearly that the practice of radiology is evolving in a few key ways. One, it's becoming increasingly independent. Pre-pandemic, health systems would directly hire radiologists 50% of the time. Fast forward today, the current study is not quite done yet. It's in process. The early data is showing that's dropped to 40% now, meaning that 40% of RADs are employed by the health system, and 60 are employed or independent, I should say. They're either like an independent corporate practice or almost like a law firm, or it's professional practice, right? So you got different makeups there, but that's kind of where the practice is going. The other thing I would say is, the pandemic amplified this. Where the radiology sits versus where the exam is acquired, that has already been transitioning over time. More and more radiologists have been doing tele-reading even within a health system. But pandemic hit, and guess what? Many RADs had to suddenly read from home. I know of at least one major health system that as soon as things started locking down, they moved all of their workstation infrastructure out of the hospital into the radiologists' homes and other environments outside of the hospital. That was a massive IT undertaking for that group as well. When you think about the resources that went into that. So there's that. The practice is by far more geographically distributed. And then I think also, RADs are under a lot of pressure these days. It's, I think, well documented that there's broad amount of burnout and inefficiencies and everything else in radiology. And I would describe it as unnecessary burden on RADs. Things that we should be able to do better from an IT experience. And I think now that technology's matured to the point where it is today, the intersection of cloud and AI, leveraged in the right way, can really address that issue too.
Excellent. And want to talk about some of the challenges that we're seeing in AI. But before that, kind of the thing that's really interesting to me, and it's the thing that I've kind of admired about Arterys, is the fact that you're an AI firm, but with a cloud viewer, kind of puts you at that intersection of these two trends. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, tell me how that's so cool.
Yeah, when I left, traditionally my entire career, I've spent my life in, PACS, where the experience is the viewer. And when I looked across the spectrum of AI companies, when I was looking at, what I wanted to do for my next steps, there was only really for me one obvious choice, because of the viewer. And I think the viewer is very important to the AI experience, especially for the radiologist. Many use cases need to be interactive for the radiologist because, first of all, AI is not perfect. Either are people, and they can do a good job most of the time. And even two competent people that are good in their job, they may disagree slightly on a segmentation or something like that too, right? So I wouldn't expect a human to agree with any algorithm 100% of the time on certain details. So, if you're doing a segmentation workflow, and that should be a key one for a radiologist. They spend their day quantifying structures and pathologies and in the body, right? There's no reason why we can't automate these things, but to do it effectively, it can't be a static finding, because they're not going to agree with that finding 100% of the time. Has to be easily editable and included into the report, right? And also, the RADs need control over which findings to include. For example, a patient may present with many nodules, but a radiologist isn't going to report them all. They're going to report the top 3 to 5, depending on whether doing RECIST or Fleischner's or lung RADs, right? So, again, this interactive experience is really important. If you actually think about the user experience and you empathize with what a radiologist has to do every day, I think you'll see that in many cases, AI algorithms aren't integrated in a way that's efficient for them to include the results into their work. So the viewer, I think, is central to especially radiologist relevant AI.
Got it. Back to the AI question. And obviously it's we're early in the AI ball game, but there's kind of mixed experiences so far. And what I'm curious is, you're based on your own analysis, understand that you've seen and evaluated plenty of algorithms in your day. Why has clinically useful AI been a challenge?
Yeah, it's that was almost the most interesting case study for me when I joined Arterys. One of the first exercises we did was, well, first, we formed a good, broad, diverse clinical expert task force to inform and help support our analysis of 250 or so algorithms that are out there that would be potential for us to commercialize. We partnered with a few key algorithm producers that focused around neurological diseases, because we felt they were in the best place to be commercialized in a relatively short amount of time. The rest of the algorithms, they failed to pass the test. Like, we had a hard time, honestly, finding enough that we wanted to give a serious shot and invest our resources into, for, again, multiple reasons. But some of the common ones that came out were either they're problems that they have to mature for a period of time more. And I think a great example of that is malignancy. I think it's going to take time for people to grow some trust around these types of algorithms. And most of the physicians that I work with that are developing these today will tell me they're, potentially a decade out. And I'm sure there's varying opinions on that. But the point is, if you're looking at putting something into useful clinical practice today, clearly, those aren't there. We also saw many examples where it would almost be like a boutique kind of, or very isolated kind of use case, where it would be really hard to amplify it, and the effort of deploying it, integrating it into a clinically useful workflow, and the cost just didn't make sense. There were either people who were too clinical or too technical, right? So either they had a really great clinical problem, but technically, like, it's there wasn't a good plan there, or wasn't mature enough, and vice versa. There was a lot of, I think, PhD computer scientists who thought they could disrupt the world on their own, but really these two things can't be independent. And the other thing I would say that is also really telling too, where clinically useful AI is going to that point, is at Arterys, we're also really privileged. I mean, we get to work with some of the leading AI labs and radiology practices in the world, and we can see exactly how the practice is transforming. They're the canary in the coal mine for me. And why I say that is, one of the groups that we work with, Dr. Albert Zhao, leads a lab at UCSD, the ADA Labs, and he's got a talented group of physician data scientists working under him that are, also very talented group of residents. And, what he tells me, and what other leaders and other organizations tell me, is that they can't attract the top residents to their universities unless they have a solid AI program. And honestly, that tells you exactly where the practice is going. I almost look at it as like the first generation of those physicians are out there, right, with their combination of computer science and medical degrees, and they're teaching the next generation, and they're just going to exponentially spread out across, North America and the world. And this group and we get to work with it, and we get to see it happening. They are already creating this valuable, what we call second wave of AI. It is the practice and computer science, kind of merging together, and it's focusing on the right problems to move the practice forward, basically, right? When it's your own, it's a different game. So,
right. Just when you thought med school couldn't get harder, you have to learn.
Yeah.
Well, for certain people,
very smart.
Yeah, for sure they are. So how about kind of the flip side? Where are the pockets of value, or the areas where AI is delivering value today?
Yeah, so we are very famous for cardiac 4D flow, and not just 4D flow, but complete MRI analysis, and You'll see a lot more on our cardio front in the near future as well. And that is a great example of many things going on. It's speeding up the radiologist or cardiologist significantly, 25 minutes an exam. These are complicated exams. And it's also giving them insights into anatomy and function they otherwise you wouldn't be able to do on a PACS workstation, for example. Like it's the flow measurements and everything else that's happening, you wouldn't be able to do it without the AI algorithms. So there's, that's a great example where we're basically producing a higher quality report, giving better insights into conditions and anatomy, and helping the radiologists save time and produce a better quality product. Lung, we have great lung workflows as an example that, today, if you want to do lesion tracking, it's very complicated and you've got to fill out a lot of details, and many rads don't even yet know what Fleischner is versus Resist is, which I found very surprising. But we got the feedback a lot when you're implementing your templates. Make sure you call it what it's for: incidentals, cancer care follow-up, or screening, right? So, so we can actually automate all that, taking a lot of we talked about how rads are under pressure and burnout and all of this. So this helps reduce tedium. So single click on a lesion. I clicked on the lesion. That means I care about it. I'll add that one to the report and I'll ignore all the noise, all the other lesions I don't want to report. And also when I clicked on it, not only did I add it to the report, but I quantified it both in 2D space, 3D space. I filled it the Fleischner's template, or whatever template I'm using for whatever clinical workflow. And it was included in my PowerScribe report automatically. I didn't have to do anything else, right? So that is way different than a lesion tracking follow-up in your traditional PACS today. Another great example I would say is an example of almost a population health incident that we're working on. That's a result of the pandemic, where this health system fell very behind on their CT. So they have like a few weeks CT backlog, and it is having an impact to health outcomes, very significant, severe impact to patient health outcomes. And we are, the great thing about a cloud native platform, this is actually a really, really great example. So we can integrate an algorithm on our platform from a third party, make it available in an interactive way in our viewer. The first one that I did personally on the first Epic I managed with the development team here, I did it in 4 days. Wow. And it was deployed on our platform, worldwide access, just like that. No upgrading, 200 different accounts and everything else that comes with that. Why I bring that up, we recently had an opportunity to come to us asking us for help because they have the CT backlog, and they said, we need a solution for triple rule out, and we need to start screening all of our CTs so that we get at least, a first level triage on this stuff. And we can, with a cloud platform, deploy this stuff again in a matter of days. So, that I would say another great example of something we're working on. In other regions, there are certain countries in the EU that don't have enough radiologists. And so x-rays aren't interpreted by radiologists. ED physicians interpret them directly. And, I'm not a radiologist, but I can see that many x-rays are not easy to interpret, even for a radiologist, because we often test them with our AI and say, hey, do you see anything here? And, right. And so now we've got AI assisting ED physicians in certain countries in Europe. So at least they get, an expert or at least a resident level radiologist look over the shoulders and say, hey, is there anything you might be missing here, right? We're actually excited to leverage that kind of technology in North America in different ways. I think in North America, it's different. In North America, every exam will always be read. Right. But, we struggle with our ED turnaround times. I can't, as a patient sitting in our EDs, and I know I'm sitting here in Waterloo, Canada. And I know it's the same in the US. I spend more time in the US health system, by the way, than I do in the Canadian health system. Right. But all my US colleagues are like, yeah, we have the same weight in the EDs too. And you're just waiting for some rad to hit your X-ray. You're just waiting for hours, right? It's like, because it's low priority, whatever. But as an ED physician, you could now be more empowered to say and take a their expert opinion of it, plus an AI's expert opinion of it, and maybe they say, yeah, it's negative or very clear, right? And they can take action and manage your own patient throughput better, and we can generate a kind of a follow-up workflow for the radiologist for when they do read it to say this was the finding, preliminary findings from the ED physician and the AI. Do you agree, disagree, and have a follow-up workflow based on that, right? So yeah, there's just really honestly so many exciting things right now. I see lots of investment in the market. There are also many vendors like AI producers approaching us as well, because they need a platform to get their AI out there and integrate it, because many vendors also see that it's hard to build your DICOM stack and integrate into all the modalities and integrate into the packs and provide that beautiful experience and stuff like that. So we do get a lot of visibility to the pockets of where things are being adopted, and there's really a lot of activity right now.
Cool. All right, so we'll try to bring it all back together. So we have these two emerging trends here. We have in converging trends, right? So we have cloud and we have AI, and they're both kind of there's a lot of excitement around it, and also there's probably some ways to go for each. So maybe help us understand your vision for kind of short term as these things converge and some of the good things that will come from it, and then what to expect long term.
Great question. I think to begin with, it's going to be largely cost that's driving the transformation. So again, reducing the data center capacity and IT infrastructure management within health systems and RAD groups. So the first wave, I think, is largely driven by economics. Second, I think, we can also automate with that many low-hanging fruit and improve the radiology experience. And I think that will also is happening now. So you're going to see more of that in the short term. Longer term, this is going to grow into a bigger data strategy when your data is in the cloud. I mean, population health and everything else, as algorithms like malignancy and various types of detections and other algorithms for various diseases, whether it's bone density or whatever, all this stuff matures. I mean, the sky is going to be the limit for managing your populations, and probably even simulating treatments and everything else that comes from that, right? So that is much easier to do when your data is in the cloud versus today. It's pretty much locked up into a bunch of different archives, even within a single health system. Most health systems still don't have like a single IT infrastructure, right? So again, I think that's the first step. Get that data up to the cloud, improve your user experience, build a cloud experience for them, let them read from anywhere, help support the low-hanging fruit on their workflow that can help automate and support what a radiologist does today, and get prepared for, again, I think I think we're speeding up in transformation here. I think it's going to continue to get more and more exciting. So, all
right, well, I'm excited, and I really enjoyed this conversation, Steve. So thanks, and keep up the good work. You're working hard over there. I'll see you at RSNA.
Thanks, Jake. Look forward to it. Take care.